So we are talking about the movie I Am Hero, a 2015 zombie movie from Japan, directed by Shinzuki Sato. Now the story here focuses on a hapless young manga artist who essentially dreams of becoming a hero. He's a bit downtrodden at work, his mangas aren't selling, he's not particularly popular, he's got problems with his girlfriend, she's kind of had enough of him. However, this is all on the day of a zombie apocalypse, and he has to step up to the plate as he kind of bumped into this kind of young schoolgirl in this, all the chaos that's happening in this apocalypse, and try to get her to safety. And he meets a few other characters along the way, a kind of a small community of survivors, and chaos ensues. So let's talk about I Am Hero. Let's get any negatives out of the way first, and then we will talk about the good stuff, because there is a lot of good stuff to discuss. But let's get those negatives out of the way first of all. The main critique I have is there is a kind of twist that happens just before the halfway point. We get a character that is essentially somewhat of a hybrid. That's all I'll kind of say in regards to who that is and what actually happens in regards to that. But nothing is really done with it. They set up this quite interesting dynamic where we have this kind of a character with a foot in both both worlds. But then that's the last you'll really hear about it for the rest of the film, and nothing's really done with it. So it seemed pointless to kind of set that up, and it was a bit of a real odd choice, because that character is essentially sidelined for the remainder of the film for the most part, and that story point is never picked up on again. So I thought that was bizarre, and I don't know if it's kind of setting up something for a sequel, but as a standalone film, I found it a little bit frustrating that was kind of a point that was just seemingly kind of forgotten about. Second thing is, I do feel the second act, the midway point of this film, slows down a little bit too much. It kind of gets to a point where you're kind of thinking your interest level was slightly dipping away. It does pick up at the end, although the first act of this movie is by far the strongest, I personally feel, and this third act is definitely one for the ages in regards to the kind of the gore levels. But the second act for me just slowed down just a little bit too much. But let's talk about the good stuff, because there is a lot of good stuff to talk about. I think the central character here, Hideo Suzuki, I think his name is character, is essentially Japan's answer to Ash from the Evil Dead series. He is a kind of reluctant hero that steps up to the plate, that has a love of shotguns, even though he does seem to have unlimited ammo to a certain point. But he's a great character, very much a kind of an underdog in every man, and you really do root for him. And I don't feel like the kind of the cultural differences really apply. I think he's a character that kind of everyone can kind of like get behind and root for. So I kind of really liked his character. Second thing I think I really loved was the design of the zombies. I watch a lot of horror films, and I especially watch a lot of zombie films. And I've got to say, this is one of the first films in a long time where I thought zombies were genuinely scary in a number of ways. First of all, the actual design of them and the look is somewhat different than we've seen from traditional zombies before. They do something really kind of gross with the eyes, with the eyes kind of bulge out and kind of go either side. It looks kind of really freaky, and the faces look very kind of bulbous and stuff like that. There's some pretty disturbing deformities that these zombies have, I've got to say. So they actually look pretty funky and really good. And they actually made the zombies kind of unique. They have kind of unique facets to a certain degree. So it kind of almost reminds me in a way of like a Resident Evil, where you have different types of kind of creatures and stuff, and they'll basically have some kind of elements of the last thing that they were doing. And there's a kind of great hero zombie, if you like, with kind of half a head, who tends to be the kind of the biggest singular threat in regards to the zombies themselves. But there's not the threats aren't only zombies. We have a kind of like obviously humans kind of like fighting amongst themselves as well. We've seen it in The Walking Dead. You'll have it here, and that threat is I think is handled quite well as well. And the majority of the cast do a pretty good job of acting. I think the special effects are great. I thought the location shooting was great, and you really do feel like this world is like gone to shit. Maybe one little critique I have also that I forgot to mention: the sense of time is a little bit wonky here. You don't really get an idea about how long this is all sort of going on. There is a bit of a time jump, and you don't really feel like there should have been, if that makes sense. It just seems to flip to some amount of time later. I really did like as well, there's a kind of conceit that happens within the movie that there may be some type of safe haven, and they throw in some science about why this might happen and why it's maybe a point that people want to get to, but gives people a genuine reason to want to get to that point. So that I really liked. Again, I won't spoil it for you, but I thought that was a clever idea. But overall, the action is thick and fast. The gore effects is very gory. It is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but the gore effects are somewhat realistic, I would say. But it's a very fun movie. The actual opening sequences of all these actual zombies, their first attack is fantastic. It's one of the best I've seen committed to film. And the end of it is, maybe not quite as good as the first act, I would say, but still a thrilling kind of climax with loads of gore, loads of blood and brains being kind of splattered everywhere, to a very exciting finale. Overall, this is a very, very good zombie film, let down by a couple of story elements, in my opinion, but overall, it's definitely worth your time. Obviously, it's Japanese film, so hence subtitles, but like I said, I think it's quite accessible. 7 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment. I now shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.